Hi, everybody. I'm John Metzger, one of the cloud solution architects in Microsoft. I've done one other presentation at this group, and that was, I think, another cognitive services thing. This one's on rapid bot development using the bot framework composer. So hopefully, it's a slight change of gear from the Darren's one before. This is kind of how to build something relatively quickly in Azure using platform features. Yeah. So we'll have a quick, this will be mostly demo, this talk, but what I'll do is just give a quick overview of this whole concept of conversational AI and how that fits within the overall framework of bots, and sorry, the overall framework of cognitive services, to get it right. Then we'll look at the bot framework and composer, and we'll spend most of the time on demos. So and a little summary if we get that far and I don't overrun, which is entirely possible. So in Azure, for those that don't know, there are a bunch of AI services, and you can kind of class them in a number of different ways. One of the ways of classification is the use of pre-built AI, and I did one a number of months ago about using speech to text and things like that, and that are pre-built cognitive services. There are ones on images, all sorts of things to do with voice, transcription, translation, and so forth. Right at the other side of things, there's the proper thing that people think is AI, the custom AI, where machine learning is used to do things like classification, looking for things, but you are essentially building those services yourself on the lower tier. In the middle here are cognitive services, or conversational AI, and there are a few services in conversational AI that kind of are grouped together to give you the kind of the bot experience, and we'll just go over those. So the point of conversational AI is to give kind of human-like conversations, and the business point, of course, of that is to relieve business, real people, FTEs at companies, of doing things like triaging calls, answering obvious questions, and sort of things that you'd normally expect somebody on the other side of a chat experience or a phone call, a call center, to be doing. So it is very much about automating some or all of some of these processes. And underneath that is the bot framework, which has been around for a while, a few years now. But what's been the bot framework is designed to work on a number of different channels. You can embed the experience inside a web page of your own choosing. You can also hook it in to things like Skype, Teams, Slack, Alexa, and things like that. So with the same, effectively the same bot content. So they're sort of called channels. So you can hook them into things. The one I'll be showing today is just a plain old web one, because sometimes customers like to embed these experiences in their web page. There's a cognitive service called Lewis, and that is used, and the other name for it is language understanding, and that's used for interpreting the intent of what the user is trying to say. So when we're building a bot, we don't have to kind of laboriously try and parse what they're saying. We essentially give it a bunch of samples of utterances and things people will say, and it will kind of do some form of inference from those. And I'll show you a bit of that later. So the bot framework composer came about because doing stuff in the bot framework itself is very much of a developer experience. And that's great for developers, and I'm an ex-developer. I love that sort of stuff, but it actually is quite low level. And the bot framework composer is much more of a visual development experience. And that kind of suits a lot of what goes on with building bots is used with sort of more business audiences. And so if we can give them tools which allow them to build bots with fewer developers or less development, then that's going to sort of widen the audience for being able to do stuff. So it sort of falls into this category of low/no code. You can do things with pretty well no code up to a point. And I'm doing one with a customer right now in the public sector, and we haven't had to jump out of the Composer at all. So it's great, and it's also kind of an integrated testing environment. There's a Composer, and I'll show you this stuff in a minute. Is the design surface, and then there's an emulator with it as well, which allows you to test the whole thing iteratively, and go through a whole pile of development life cycles before you actually ever deploy anything to Azure. But in the Composer tool itself, it also has the capability of provisioning the resultant bot environment, which is kind of the infrastructure that is the bot. And after that, you can then publish subsequent versions of your bot code, as it were. So behind the scenes, this effectively is building all the code into a web app, and you're doing a publish or a deploy to a web app behind the scenes in very much the way you might do from Visual Studio if you're building a web app. One of the downsides is like a little space there is no source code control integration. This is no low code, but it's still defining the bot as a bunch of files. And like anything, when you're doing things, it's very easy to paint yourself into a corner, and it's very much important to make sure that the files it generates are under source code control if you don't want to lose a change. But you'd have to do that sort of separately on the file system or using Git tools or whatever. So demos. So I'll get out of this and see if I can find. I've got this annoying second page. I'll just quit my PowerPoint. It's why are we doing this? Oh, it's great. My PC's decided to move about. Which screen are we on? Are you showing my my notes? I'm going to share the other screen. Excuse me.
Yeah, we can see your notes.
Yeah, it decided to do some sort of weird sharing thing. Well, just a second, I will reshare the right screen. Screen 1. Yeah, screen 1. This is what I picked before. Okay, good. Yes. So we're actually in the right place. So this is the bot framework Composer tool itself, and this is the kind of experience you see. Is it kind of big enough for everybody? Can you see it? Because it's hard to know how these things scale on the chat on the thing.
Looks
yes,
okay.
you can see the Composer here. Cool. So it's very much a kind of a project-like experience that you'd get in a lot of things. New project, a list of your recent projects, and when you create a new project, you can either do a completely blank one, or they've got a lot of nice little sample templates that show you some base level capability. So kind of that. And what I've done is I've created one called this one here, and hopefully it will play correctly. So this is once you've opened a project, and I've created a little project just for this user group. Isn't that exciting? And this one sort of allows somebody to ask questions about this user group, which is going to be interesting to see how well it works. So looking at this kind of design surface, what you've got here is this is the view of the project, as it were, and there's a series of what are called dialogues down here, and some of these can be very simple. And this one here is, you can see it's quite graphical. It's asking a question, displaying some choices, and then it's branching and depending on the choice that's been chosen. So you can do things like that, or you can just display a response. Yeah. There is also this notion of intents, and this is kind of an important part of what we're trying to do. Is you're trying to get the user to tell you, the user's typing in what they want, and it then interprets that as an intent. When the first thing the bot starts, it always starts off with a greeting intent. And that's kind of the standard way a bot sort of bootstraps itself. And there's kind of some welcome text that you can sort of customize. After that, you can just type stuff in. And what we've got here, so for example, if I've got who. There's an intent here called who, and if we look on the right-hand side here, this is kind of how it works. You put in sample trigger phrases, and the language understanding, the Lewis engine, when you start the bot, will do some sort of inference on this, and you can it can then recognize variations of these phrases. The user doesn't have to type them exactly in, and if you put in more of these phrases, it just makes it more accurate. And what happens is these are the trigger phrases for the intent, and you can say if the score, it effectively comes back with a score from the thing the person typed in. If the score is greater than a certain amount, yes, this intent's definitely happening, and in this case, call this dialogue. So the whole thing's built up of recognizing intents, and then doing things with dialogues. And in dialogues, you can ask other questions. You can go through sort of trees of things. The great thing is it is to create a new trigger intent, you would say, I think I've already got one. You could have something like, call it like that, and you could have that one phrase, is there food? You can say, are there pizzas? And we know the answer to this one, because the answer is no, unless you've done that yourself. So you can, as quickly as that, create an intent trigger. And obviously, the more things you put in here, the more variety you put in here, the higher likelihood is of it getting it right. And the great thing about this sort of development, if you find people use phrases differently, you can build this thing up. It's kind of source code control. So that is the sort of the design surface. What we've got here alongside the Composer app is the emulator thing here. So here is the emulator. What I'll do, I'll restart the conversation. Hopefully it will restart. So this is the little bot that I've created here. And what you've got here is how, in this section here and here, this is how the bot will appear to, when it's deployed. And, once again, there's an initial sort of greeting intent. And this is what I've done. Welcome to the Midlands. You ask some questions about the group. And so you can say things like, where I hate doing these things on things. Yeah, so you can see that's the same question again. Yeah, so you can see it's reversed those two around. So what you can do is to try and make, when you give responses to things, you can actually give a whole pile of alternate responses to try and it's almost Hitchhiker's Guide, making it almost like a more human type robot type thing. So it's very easy to sort of build up a list of style of responses to not make the bot too kind of boring. So the other interesting thing is you've got a bunch of trace here, and what it is doing is looking at this particular one here, for example, it's looking for an intent, and it's because I've typed that, it's scored that who MAUG intent has a score of 0.94, and when you're kind of debugging stuff, you can sometimes see you get pick up the wrong intent, and that allow you to kind of tune the whole thing. So we got things like, yep. So I put a bunch of answers in there, and you can even have, I've got like a help intent, which will give you, it'll show kind of cards, so you needn't type stuff in. So I can do what are today's sessions. Oh yes, I'm giving myself a hint here that I've not wired that particular one up to here, but I can. So one of the other things, so this is saying that there's the Microsoft Hybrid Solutions, which is Darren's section before, and Bot Composer. This particular answer that I'm giving here is, if we go back to the Composer, this particular one, if I can find it, is it what? Yeah, so this particular one, if you look in the central part here, is making an API request to an external service to get the answer. So it's really quite easy to send API requests out of here, as long as they're kind of REST style requests, and then to sort of grab a value out of the, in this case, the return JSON, and then present that value in something here. So effectively, I've effectively set a property which says look for some value in the API, and if I go this one, is it this one here? So yes, so here I've got the other end of the API. What I've built is a noddy logic app, and this logic app here, in reality, if you were writing an API, it would go to a database or something like that. Here, the logic app is returning a hard-coded piece of JSON, and it's this JSON that is being rendered in the bot because I've called this logic app, and you can see that there's logic app being called, and yes, you can see that is a couple of minutes ago. So it's pretty easy inside the composer to build bots that interact with the outside world by calling APIs. So we're not locked down to the kind of the world inside the bot. Okay, so we've looked at that, and yes, just looking for my next bit. Yes, so this is the kind of the project I built here, which is one I've just built for this this talk. This took me about an hour to do. I've done one for another customer that was a little bit more complicated, and we worked for a few days on that. Compared with building that sort of thing in a more classical way, it is a lot more efficient. What I've got Explorer up here. I don't know whether you can see it. This is what a bot looks like on the file system, and it is a series of dialogues, and these are the names of the dialogues down here, and there is some language generation and language understanding. Language understanding is the bit where you're giving it hints of phrases that get trained in order to understand your intent. Language generation are these string substitutionary type things which allow you to build up sort of complex responses, which include things that they might have previously said or things extracted from a database or wherever. But fundamentally, this is the structure of the project. What you also have on here is a section here which has a provisioning script, which allows you to take that particular that bot and deploy all of the infrastructure into Azure to run that bot. So you tend to, in the project lifecycle, kind of do that once, and you on the command line, it's some sort of where have I got it? Yeah, it's a kind of a node command here. I'm not sure whether this is big enough or easy to see, but it's running Provision Composer with a few IDs, and then it sits away for, and you only do this once for a bot, sits away, and I don't know quite why it takes about half an hour to build the bot. It's kind of a bit of a mystery to me because most of the components look as though they're quick to build. But anyway, it then comes back with a piece of JSON with a bunch of keys and an access token, and that can then be used to, once you've built the infrastructure, and if we look inside, and I pressed the wrong button, I should have pressed that one. Where are we? Yes, so this is the infrastructure that gets built when you build a bot, and there are a number of different components to it. There's some cognitive services. I don't know why I've got a Q&A one here, but anyway, there's the app service itself, which is hosting the code of the bot. So when you take the bot that you've built and you then deploy it, it will sit on an app service, a web app, and that kind of effectively is running the code of your bot. Because behind the scenes, this is a bunch of things that then get deployed alongside a templated piece of ASP.NET code that runs the bot. So it's a web app, and then you get here is Cosmos DB. Because conversational ID requires a long-running conversation, you have to store state, and the standard way of storing state on these style of projects is a Cosmos database. There are, of course, other ways of doing it, but the out-the-box mechanism is to create a Cosmos database and keep the state information inside there. Finally, there's the actual bot thing itself. This is kind of the way it looks inside the portal. And the great thing is, so we've already seen how we can be testing it sort of locally. I've kind of published this one by, if we look in the composer again, there is the deployment script I showed you there, but there's also a little publishy thing here where you can publish your current version of it. And the last one I did was last night, and I'm not going to press it again because the access token has expired and I can't be bothered to do that again. So you publish this. This actually builds the content in the web app. And if we go back into the portal again, what you can do is you can now test that same web chat, but that's now this is now deployed into Azure. Yeah. So we're inside the portal and we can be asking the same set of questions. Hopefully I'll ask the question it can do. It's tonight, yes. So as you can see, I'm giving different answers depending on how many, each time you try it. So this is running now inside Azure, but obviously this is only visible for people who can access the portal. And the next thing we kind of really want to do is to allow other people to see it. So what we can see inside here is there are a number of channel integrations, and the default one that it builds, you can see here, there's Teams, there's a few here, Slack, Skype, Facebook, and whatever. Yes, Alexa as well. So these are the ones that could be done. By default, it gives you a web one. Actually, I'm not sure why it's got issues, but anyway, if we look at the web one, effectively, if you embed something like this iframe into your web page using the key that represents this bot, then you should have a working bot. In reality, it's kind of nicer to have a more sort of a JavaScripty version. And what I've got here is a pretty much boilerplate piece of code here, which is just a pretty much empty HTML page with creating a web chat control. And the only interesting thing about this is A, I've given it a title, and B, I've given it that key, which is here. So it's hooking on to this web chat purely because it's got that key. So what you can do is run this piece of HTML and the chatbot will work in wherever you're running it. One of the simplest ways of running this is to, I don't know whether you've noticed, there's a great little Azure feature. If I can find it. Yes. So you can set up a storage account to be a static website. So what you can do is with a storage, just a normal storage account. I think it has to be a V2. I think, a general purpose V2. So old ones won't have this capability. So for those of you not seen it before, there's this little static websitey thing here. When you switch this on and you give it like a default page, it creates a URL for you here. And then when you look inside here, it will create a container called $web. And here you can put some HTML. And one of these, I think it's probably this one, is that piece of HTML. Edit or something along those lines. Yes. So with the key in it. And what that means is if you so just using a static website, you can now host it and sort of demonstrate it to people who don't have access to Azure. So in reality, of course, you would embed this within a page with other stuff, but this works exactly like the ones both in the emulator and inside the inside the portal. So you can see that you can move relatively quickly from having something in the Composer application, using the Composer application. Yeah, so yeah, here's the project. Having something in the Composer application, testing it in the emulator through a bunch of iteration cycles, all locally on your machine, then from here, publishing it or deploying it to the underlying web app that runs the bot, and then you using something like, I mean, the static website on blob storage means that you can then show that to kind of a wider audience relatively quickly without having to do sort of much else. And that the main key to that, of course, is that the bot service has a key, has a pair of keys, but you'd use one of those keys, and it's that key that defines which bot service this sort of boilerplate piece of code points at. And so that's it, really, sort of end to end. I think it's quite a useful mechanism for building bots. It means that all sorts of different sort of different types between sort of developers, semi-business types, people who aren't C# aficionados can build a bot, get the bot working, and get it published in relatively quick time. As I said, I'm working with a customer, and the first prototypes we showed, to their business were within, a week of us even starting the project. So that's kind of, I did have a PowerPoint summary slide, but I closed the PowerPoint down because it was acting weird on me. So yeah, so that's it. So any questions?
I think you've stunned everyone into silence, John.
Yeah, stunned in one way or another, yeah.
Thanks, Paul, for sharing the link. So Paul's just shared the link in relation to the fact that you can host static websites on storage. Which is one of those little things, as there are many of them with Azure, that unless you know about it, you don't know about it, so to speak.
Oh, it's a brilliant little technique, because otherwise you'd be doing another website, and yeah, but it's a really useful feature.